Now I challenge you to a race.
Hi, I'm Diddy.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. I'm Gooey, joined as always by McKenna.
Hello.
Hey, and today we're talking about Diddy Kong Racing. Quite a big episode actually this is going to be our first episode of 2025, I believe. Yeah, that's how it goes. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to get your thoughts on record about the game. But we also have some returning and new guests here today. Returning to the show is Merritt K. Hey, Merritt.
Hey, sorry, you caught me. You caught me sipping. Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's great to have you back, and we also have a brand new guest from DK Vine. We've got Hyle.
Hey.
Hey, Hyle.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. It's great to have you here. Both of you have stuff I want to talk about before we get into the show proper. Merritt, you have a brand new game out. Last time you were here, you had a book that was great, and now you have this brand new game out, and we've played a little bit of it, and it's awesome. But if you want, why don't you, if you want to tell people about it?
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that it's awesome. It's called Fledgling Manor, and it's a visual novel. So it's a lot of reading text and looking at pictures and making choices. And it's about a reality show that is for and stars vampires. So it's kind of like a contemporary setting, kind of like What We Do in the Shadows, mixed with Big Brother. And you play as a guy who has woken up and is cast on this show against his will, like the other contestants, and basically has to try and survive, because the twist is that instead of just being eliminated from the show, like in Big Brother, if you're voted out, you are executed. So there's kind of like, this is sort of a long-running thing in visual novels / Japanese adventure games, the whole like death game thing of like, oh, if you lose, you're executed, and stuff like 999 and kind of like Danganronpa, but it's not really like a trial thing. It's more just like a popularity contest. It's a Big Brother. You're making alliances. You're working with people. It's a fairly short game if you are looking for something to play over the holidays. It plays really well on Steam Deck, and it's on Steam right now, and it's been out for about a week and is doing pretty well, which is really cool, really flattering that people like this. And it's really weird to see someone do fan art and like fan fiction of something that you've written, but it's like it's a very cool feeling to just be like, wow, okay, it doesn't matter like if this game sells another copy at this point. It's like, I'm happy. Right?
Yeah.
So it's super cool. And there's also a demo on Steam if you want to try it out before you play it.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, we've only played chapter 1, but already like, I think like it's cool. Like every single character is kind of interesting and well written and stuff. So I want to probably, we're actually recording the day before we leave for the holidays for a week. So, and we have it on, we don't have a Steam Deck. So when we get back, I think in our between time, between then and the new year, we'll probably have to get back to it, because pretty cool. Okay, so Hyle, thank you for coming on, and you're a very fitting guest for our topic of today. I guess do you want to tell everybody, if our listeners don't know, about DK Vine and the conversation and what you do?
Yeah, it's good that I'm fitting for this episode, because I don't fit in for much. But this very, very niche topic, I'm the person to come to, and I thank you for thinking of me. So I run DK Vine. We're a I guess the blunt way of putting it is a Donkey Kong fan site, although I like to, gussy that up into something more prestigious. Independent Donkey Kong journalism is the moniker I go with to make myself sleep better at night. Doesn't really work. But no, we've been going on for about 25 years now, a little over 25 years. We started in August 1999 when just dumb kids starting a website because we were so excited about Donkey Kong 64. It's obviously going to be the greatest game of all time. we want to celebrate that with our own platform. And for some reason, the website has just refused to die since then. And there's been many opportunities to just snuff it out, put it out.
Websites.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it's been going that long, because now that I think about it, I almost certainly was like browsing DK Vine on like IE on my family's Dell in like 2000. Like,
yeah, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
like I was looking at way worse and less professionally produced stuff than DK Vine. So,
well, we've kind of turned a corner. We're now about. I think we're just about ready for the internet of 1999. Now at the end of 2024.
It's coming back, right?
I mean, yeah, we'll see. Everything is collapsing around us.
Yeah, play the long game.
So, yeah, we've been going for 25 years. Last year, I made it my full-time gig. It's not easy. I mean, I'm not I'm not rolling in dough here. It's
sure.
I'm eating packets of saltines for dinner, but I'm happy. It makes me happy, and for whatever reason, it resonates with people. I think because these games that we cover, and I'm sure that will come up with the topic on today's show, they don't get a lot of love, or not the same amount of love that you would expect given the time they originally released in and how prominent they were in the gaming culture of the day. And, we've got theories as to why that is, but we're happy to kind of fill that void for people and to kind of rally the fans. It's just a welcoming, goofy place where, Donkey Kong and Rare and other fans that fit under that umbrella can just come together from around the world and, kind of just laugh at each other for doing this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I greatly, we have we're still involved, but we actually met via Legend of Zelda fan site. And just, seeing that sort of thing for other series and stuff is pretty cool. And it's cool to see them, like you said, still around, because back in the day, when I would get into like looking at Zelda fan sites and stuff, there was like, a million, like bunch of little different ones with their own, it'd be like Zelda's domain and Zelda's realm and all, and like the Deku Forest or something, and then like a whole like community of websites, and now it's only down to basically 2.
Yeah.
But it's cool for that type of thing at least still persists.
And we have branched out from beyond just the basic website. We do have the podcast, The Conversation, which has been going on for 12 years now, and it's it's still small, it's still niche, but we've been growing with each year. Like last year was our best ever because of the Super Mario Brothers movie kind of renewing interest in some of these characters and causing people to stumble upon us. And, trying to grow the YouTube channel and try to be somewhat relevant. But, it's...
The podcast is fun. And the YouTube, there's some fun videos over there, too. So, yeah, I would recommend people go and check that stuff out.
Before we get into Diddy Kong Racing, Hyle, can I ask you a question? Because I got into hot water with Donkey Kong fans about, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago. Which is an insane sentence. But I wrote an article for Kotaku that was, it was like I was broke. I was just looking for angles. And I wrote about the Great Ape War. And do you guys know about this? I mean, Hyle does, I'm sure, but
I do.
Do you guys? Yes. Okay, so there's
I've shared that article to quite a many people. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, there is like this fan theory that there was a kind of war between the Kongs at some point, because I think it comes from a bit of lore in the DKC manual where it says that the Mankey Kongs like fought against them. And then it brings in this whole other thing where like people are like, oh, Donkey Kong is like current Donkey Kong is Cranky Kong's grandson. So who is his father? And then people suspect that it's Fedora Kong, who is a deleted character, who is a real but deleted character that appeared in some art for, I want to say, Donkey Kong Country on the Game Boy Color or Game Boy.
Donkey Kong Land.
Donkey Kong Land, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Which is a game that I owned for one day before I made my parents take it back because it was impossible to see anything on the Game Boy screen. But yeah, that article has since been deleted on the Donkey Kong wiki, and I think I had something to do with that.
It's controversial.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all just fan and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, the actual war is the Crimean War, as referenced in Donkey Kong Country 3. Like, I could sit here all night, like, until the break of dawn, talking about obscure Donkey Kong lore. And I don't really want to derail their podcast because they generously invited me here, and I was like, actually, the Mankey Kongs, according to the German Donkey Kong 64 website, they originate from Utan Island, which if we study the map of the archipelago, that might be the island off of Vine Valley as seen in Donkey Kong Country.
Holy shit.
I'm not going to do that because that's fine for the conversation. But I'm not. It's like trekking mud through somebody's house when they invite you over for dinner.
Yeah. It just, I mean, again, it reminds me of like all the stupid stuff we argue about in like Zelda fan communities, and sometimes I'll get into some dumb argument and I just feel like a total idiot afterwards. I'm like, what are we talking about?
So long as it
here?
makes you happy and you're not hurting anybody or tearing them down, I say go for it. There's so little happiness in the world, and wherever we can derive it from, again, so long as it's not coming from a place of malice, who cares? Who cares?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that goes without saying. You have a history with the Nintendo 64 itself. I don't know if there's any, like, if you remember, Hyle, like what your introduction to it was. Were you already a big Kong fan, it sounds like?
So I got on board with Donkey Kong Country November 1994.
Gotcha,
and basically I was a Nintendo kid growing up. I mean, like, my parents had an NES and played that. They got me a Super Nintendo. I didn't even ask for a Super Nintendo for my birthday because I thought that was way too extravagant. And I guess because I was so demure about it, they surprised me. And, had a Game Boy, and basically all my allowance money went into, getting games for these systems. So I fell in love with Donkey Kong Country when it came out. Just the world, the ambiance, it was like nothing I'd ever played, and it was exactly what I'd been looking for, like my entire little gaming life. Just, it doesn't hurt that my favorite animals growing up were monkeys and gorillas, and I mean, it was just right up my alley. So I became just a diehard fan of that series, and really got me through like the rough little periods of adolescence. And so, of course, we knew the Nintendo 64 was coming, or the Nintendo Ultra 64 as we knew it in the West at the time. And so it was kind of a foregone conclusion that Rare would be doing a Donkey Kong game for the N64. But I didn't want to get an N64 until they announced the Donkey Kong game. And in my, I guess, overly optimistic, youthful, like, view of how game production actually worked, I thought it was going to come out in 1997 because we had Donkey Kong Country 3 in November 96. So a year later, they're going to crank out a Donkey Kong game on the N64.
Yeah, no big.
Yeah. And so I was like, I have a year, really. The day the N64 came out was also the day Donkey Kong Land 2 came out. So that's what I picked. I let the N64 just rot on the shelves for a while. But then they announced that the Donkey Kong Country style Donkey Kong, the modern DK, or Super Donkey Kong, as he was known in Japan at the time, was going to be in Mario Kart 64. So I was like, uh-oh, I have to get an N64
Wow, okay.
sooner than I thought. So I spent the entirety of that, like, December and January and February doing whatever I could to earn money. Like, I was too young to sell blood or plasma, or else I would have done that. But I did get an N64 just in time for Mario Kart 64, and I played just the hell out of Mario Kart 64. I thought it was legitimately great, and I didn't think you could improve on the kart racing genre on that system at all. And then E3 1990.
You didn't have to wait that long.
E3 1997, I was just waiting with bated breath for the Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong World, or whatever it's going to be called, right? And then they announced Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Quest. And I was livid.
yeah.
I was so upset. I thought that Rare, this was just an act of betrayal. They were just a bunch of Judases stabbing the Donkey Kong fans in our sides when we were just all in on the studio. And that angst that just... Which is really funny because Banjo-Kazooie is now one of my all-time favorite games. But, you know, at the time, I was I was very much like Team Donkey Kong, and there's never going to be anything that's going to pull me into this other franchise. The peacemaker, it turned out, was Diddy Kong Racing, because Diddy Kong Racing was quickly announced, and I don't want to bury your lead here for the episode by just getting into. But sorry, I'm just turning this into my podcast. I apologize. But yeah, Diddy Kong Racing was announced in late summer, early autumn 1997. And that was just this very crystallizing moment for my fandom. And it turned out my future career because it inadvertently led me to co-create DK Vine and still run it a quarter century later.
So, yeah, I guess we're right on the money then with you as a guest for this. This is the perfect game for you to come on here.
Yes.
Which is great. And no, you set us up perfectly to talk about the game, and now I'm actually going to derail the podcast for a moment.
Sorry to break the party, worms!
What we like to do here, we like to go back and talk about just a little bit of the things that were also going on at the time in pop culture. And Merritt, the last time you were on was in October, I think it was, or we were in October, I should say, of 1997. And it's been many months of recording since then, but we have only come up to November 24th, 1997.
It was a big season.
We've had to play a lot of racing games, 2 football games.
God, I bet.
2 football games the same day came out. So there was a lot to do. So sadly, not much new has happened since October. We're in week 8 of Candle in the Wind being the number 1 song.
Wow.
Yeah, we've kind of, I don't know if you guys want to get into it, but we like to, poll everyone on their feelings on the death of Princess Di. I think actually when you were on Merritt, she had died that day or the day before.
Yeah, I remember. It was very emotional the day we recorded.
I'm sorry to keep bringing this up.
No,
to you.
It's fine. Just tear that wound open. MI6 really definitely killed her, right? Because they were afraid that she was going to age and become, she would only become more and more popular as she became less attractive and more off-putting to the public. So they had to nip that in the bud. And make her an undying legend by doing that. People believe that, by the way. People believe that she was murdered by the royal family. I don't know. I was so young. Actually, my mom is British, so it was kind of a big deal in our house. I remember the news being on for several days, and we had books in our house that were Charles and Diana, cartoon type books. It was a phenomenon. That was, before all that. But then, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really have any strong feelings about it.
Yeah.
It's, an insanely rich, famous person died when I was like 6 or 7 or something. And, yeah, I don't know.
The common
she had a Beanie Baby that was worth a lot of money, I think.
That's my main memory of it. I think
yes,
that's really
that is mine too.
how I became aware of it was
Yep.
through the Beanie Baby.
Yeah.
I used to love they'd have all like the lore on the little tag where
Yes.
you'd read their name. And I remember like reading that and like, what are they talking about? Who is this? What happened? It's so awful. Hyle, how about you? I mean, most people we talk to are a lot like that, where it's like I was a adolescent and I wanted to play video games. So Diddy Kong probably subsided a lot of the thoughts of that.
I don't know what was wrong with me. It's not like I was riveted by the story, but I was always intrigued by news that was like above my head, and so like I would consume it and just watch it. I was like, this is an historic moment. And I don't know what, like I knew who Princess Diana was, obviously, just from pop culture osmosis, and so it felt like a big deal because up until that point you hadn't like lived through many high profile deaths like that, like sudden deaths. And my biggest memory, though, is that was my introduction to Sir Elton John, and so that remake of "Candle in the Wind" was the first Elton John song I remember hearing, and I mean, I didn't really like get a good understanding of his discography or his legend at the time, but yeah, like I saw him in concert the other year. He was still phenomenal. Like, so thank you. I was going to say thank you, Princess Diana, but that's in poor taste.
Took one for the team. I feel like you're the first person we've had on that like it actually maybe impacted them slightly.
I mean, it didn't impact me, but I'm a freak. I'm somebody who would like try to absorb as much culture, I guess, like real world lore. I love lore. I love stories, and I love just like the details of things in storytelling. It's why I like Tolkien, and I like just anything with a really, really fleshed out, like almost like incidental to the actual narrative kind of world. So I've just always been kind of like that, even when I was really, really little. So yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me.
You should check out Beanie Babies. They got some good lore.
Yeah.
I lived through the Beanie Baby craze, and I didn't get it then. So I think it's passed me by, unfortunately.
For years, nothing's been hotter than those cuddly little animals with cute little names.
To kind of counteract just talking about Candle in the Wind, which I guess that was satisfactory, but we've also been tracking the song Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba.
Wow.
Just because
Incredible.
it's like the one new song that showed up in the top 10 that we got really excited about. So it was hovering around 7, then 8 on the Billboard charts, but now it's at number 6. So I'm hoping, I don't actually know how far it went, but I'm hoping we can get, I think Candle in the Wind might rule out number 1, but let's get Tub Thumping higher.
Yeah.
We can't do anything about it. It already happened, but also the number 1 album at the time was Higher Ground by Barbra Streisand. So, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. We tried listening to it. It wasn't the vibe at the moment.
it's hard to imagine now, like an album like that being number 1.
Yeah. We've had a couple of those over the year or so we've done it, and yeah, you don't really see ballads like that so much.
Yeah.
I remember the Kmart put all the Chumbawamba CDs behind the counter because they told people to steal their albums if and so basically like all these department stores were like, oh no, so they put them behind the counter. So I remember when I was in the electronics department of Kmart looking for like any Diddy Kong Racing like pre-release box arts like they would sometimes have. I remember seeing the Chumbawamba CDs behind the counter.
Number one movie at the time, I think we already mentioned this last episode, but it was Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So,
Huh?
yeah.
Wait, what?
Just the weekend box office. Yeah, that one week,
okay,
the one
yeah.
weekend.
The one weekend. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All I remember about that movie is it has like a really stupid looking centaur in it.
Yeah.
And he's played by Darren McBee, who I think was an American. He was Malibu. Yeah, he was Malibu on American Gladiators, and then he was a centaur in Mortal Kombat, and that's it.
Also, what's his name? Shao Kahn, the Emperor. He's played by the great character actor Brian Thompson, not the CEO guy who just got killed.
Sure. Can you imagine?
Wow. I actually like. I don't want to get into it, but I kind of like Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It's got like goofy, actually Power Ranger style fight scenes.
Was he the bounty hunter in the X-Files?
I believe
so.
I just put that together.
Brent,
I
was,
just made that connection. I was like, wait, where do I know him from? Oh, yeah.
We love him from Star Trek. He's
was,
in a bunch of Star Trek.
Yeah, he's done a bunch of Star Trek. He was on Kindred the Embraced, which is Bring Back to Vampires, which is the Vampire the Masquerade Fox TV show that no one remembers.
No, I had no idea. No.
Yep.
And Robin Cho. I'm just gonna shout out everyone in the movie. Robin Cho played Liu Kang. He was awesome. Okay.
Go for it.
Diddy Kong Racing. Let's get into it. McKenna, set it up. Tell us about Diddy Kong Racing.
Diddy Kong Racing is an adventure racing game in which you'll be able to choose from 10 characters and 3 vehicles: the car, the hovercraft, and the aeroplane. The game features 5 worlds with various themed courses. In adventure mode, you'll unlock worlds by collecting balloons, which you get by winning races or finding hidden ones in the hub world. Racers will be able to pick up bananas on the tracks to increase their speed, as well as power-up balloons, which have various effects. Each world contains a boss race, where you must race against a creature that's been possessed by the evil Whizpig. Defeating them unlocks a silver coin challenge, which must be completed so you can challenge them again and retrieve a piece of Whizpig's amulet. Each world also features a challenge mode, which must be unlocked by finding a key in one of the world's courses. Up to 4 players can race in tracks mode, or you can race against the clock in a time trial.
There's all that, and I still feel like there's like more you can do in the game, which is cool.
Yeah.
So Hyle, we mentioned this sounds like a super important game for you, but I guess I was wondering, Merritt, what's your backstory with Diddy Kong Racing?
Yeah, so this isn't one that I ever owned, but one of my best friends growing up did. So we definitely like played a lot of it, and I remember like there being like pretty active contention between people who were like, oh no, Mario Kart 64 is the best, and like, no, Diddy Kong Racing is the best. And I always kind of preferred this one. I mean, I loved Mario Kart 64 as well. I think when I went back to it like a decade later, it didn't hold up so well. Diddy Kong Racing, I feel like the last time I played it was at this point about 10 years ago, and it did hold up fairly well. What I liked most about it was that there was this sense of like exploration that I think you see then later on in Rare's N64 output, where it's not exactly the same because it is like mainly like racing, but you have these tracks where you're like looking for different objects, and there are these different shortcuts, and just even the sense of like freedom in flying the planes around. Like, it wasn't super common at the time outside of like dedicated, flight-based games to have, games where you were in a vehicle where you're flying in like 360 degrees. Like Star Fox 64 was like maybe the only other one I can really think of. And it was just really cool to be able to just like, zoom around and navigate. These felt like real kind of like living worlds. Like this was like the huge big shift, right? From the Super Nintendo to like, oh my God, like the last time I was on, we were talking about Mischief Makers, and I adore that game. I think it's fantastic, and it's like this great artistic achievement. And at the same time, it is not that big a shift from the kinds of gameplay that you were seeing on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Whereas Diddy Kong Racing was like, wow, this is it. Like, it's not going to get any better than this, right? Like this, wow, it's like, it looks perfect. And I can't imagine video games ever advancing beyond this. That's, I think, what I thought at the time. But
I don't remember actually if I owned it myself, because I think I spent a lot of time playing it more with one of my friends, and I don't recall, like, I recall having a similar like reaction to like just the open exploration in the world and stuff, but it just didn't feel like any other game. Like flying around, even like being able to like just kind of casually do it and like, you know, explore with a plane and find the like balloons hidden behind stuff, like that felt way different than in Star Fox, like, or something like that. You're like, it's always like arcade mode on, you're always like fighting, you know. It's like, it was like interesting to use it in an exploration sense, and always like, it did feel like, whoa, like this new thing. But I don't recall a ton of doing that like on my own. So I think I might not have owned that, but it's when I'm like, I don't know, there's certain things I'm fuzzy about, because like a lot of, I also had like, I think I mentioned this before, but like 3 different households like between my families with N64 games, and things got mixed up with friends and stuff. So I played a bunch of it, but definitely Mario Kart was what would be revisited like in my life more so. And I think it's just due to the fact that like more people I've known like beyond childhood like know Mario Kart and don't know Diddy Kong as well. So it was always just like the easiest thing to go back to. But I think playing it's like, obviously I think it's much better than Mario Kart. But McKenna, you've never played it before at all, and also I think we've established Donkey Kong isn't really a series you know much about. We did an episode on the arcade games, and you're Donkey Kong Jr. expert now, but yeah, I don't know I don't know. This was your introduction to Diddy Kong, which works, I think. But what'd you think of the game?
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
I did really like just being able to drive around in the like hub world. That's something I've played like a few games this year that were they're driving games but not like racing games. So I'm just like driving around the world. And I like hanging out in worlds, and I feel like that's something I can do here a little bit, just driving around. And that's not something we've seen a ton of yet in N64 games.
Even
like
we're coming
most of
off
the time
of
we're
a lot of
like
racing
being
games,
just constantly being pushed forward to complete objectives. Where here I'm just, you know, out in the world, and I can decide when I want to go do a race or do a challenge.
Yeah, race the elephant or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has been like we've covered one other racing game that had something similar to one aspect of Diddy Kong Racing, where you can collect keys, and I think, was it San Francisco Rush? I think it was. Had keys you could find in the level, but it also would, if you like got too far behind, I feel, right? Was that the one where it would push you forward? It was like, it was not as like easy to like in the levels like explore, and they had like those little stunt areas you could find, but it was always like during a race, and it would like keep pushing you forward if you blew up, or you know, and stuff. Where this, like, there's keys in the levels even, and so even though you're racing, you don't even need to win, you can start poking around the levels and stuff like that. So it made I mean, the races were fun themselves, but that added aspect was pretty cool. It's also, this is our fourth rare game, right, on the console so far. We had Killer Instinct, Blast Core, GoldenEye. I think that's it, right? So
Yeah.
I think these are all pretty heavy hitters. Like we've been talking about like the games that stand out as we've gone through chronologically, and like a lot of them we've like have kind of lacked that sort of like extra sort of presentation and like that extra like sort of polish. And I think like outside of Nintendo, like the Rare games obviously have all stood out in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Hyle, this was a super important game to you, it sounds like. I guess Mario Kart, it sounds like you really like that, but did it really satisfy like your Kong needs, you know?
It was the first time I could drive or just move around as Donkey Kong in a pseudo 3D space. So I remember one of my favorite things to do would be to go into time trial mode, go to Royal Raceway, and just drive around the grounds of Peach's castle, but as Donkey Kong. So it was like by way of modding Super Mario 64 with Donkey Kong. Whoa. Like, you know, just the better, superior version of the game. And I would just drive around in circles and eventually get annoyed by Lakitu yelling at me for driving in reverse. And I'm just like, well, why did you put this here then? And then I would turn off the game. And so it basically just became a waiting game, you know, when we would get a rare Donkey Kong game. And I would have never thought that Diddy Kong Racing would have been the thing. Like, you know, we were just looking for that 3D Donkey Kong platformer, but Diddy Kong Racing took everyone by surprise. It had a ridiculously short turnaround time from when the decision was made for it to come out in November of 97, which was, of course, going to be Banjo-Kazooie's release date. And they famously had a big promotional deal lined up with Taco Bell to promote Banjo-Kazooie. It was going to be Nintendo's big game for Holiday 97. And at E3 97, when they announced it, I think a few of the creative members behind the team, and I don't want to say, I don't want to misappropriate this to the wrong person, but I remember them like saying that they were kind of breaking down behind the scenes because they knew it wasn't going to be ready and all these expectations were being placed on them. And when the decision was made that we have to delay Banjo-Kazooie because it's not going to be ready, the fact that Rare had a game ready to go and that it's as good as it is, let alone a genre-defining classic, it's bewildering because the decision was made sometime in the middle of the summer. It was announced the end of summer, early autumn, came out that November. I mean, that would never happen nowadays, and it never happened then. I mean, what?
Also, a team of like 14 people, I think, worked on this. And yeah, it was originally going to be, I think, like a RC Pro-Am sequel or spin-off or something.
Yeah.
Or
Pro-Am
spin-off to some other NES
Pro-Am 64.
Yeah, and right, and then it was like they were just like, this is nothing, it needs like a license or something, and it went through this period of being like a sort of Disney-inspired like theme park type thing, which I could kind of see, like based on like the different lands and stuff. You can sort of see how that works. And then apparently Miyamoto is like, you should put Diddy Kong in it, and they were like, go to hell. And then eventually we're like, yeah, okay, fine. Like they tell it differently in different tellings. Like sometimes they're like resistant to it, and sometimes they're like, oh, we wanted to do Diddy Kong because he's like our guy because we invented him.
Yeah.
And
make
we
it
own
seem
him,
like it's
and
your
not
idea.
Nintendo.
So
yeah,
from like gathering all the different tellings and given what I've like learned from like my visit to Rare in 2016, I was privy to some juicy info that I probably shouldn't have seen. It sounds like you know, it's Pro-Am 64. At one point, it was like adventure racing, and then it evolved into like a continuation of the RC Pro-Am license. And it was still going to star the animal characters even when it was Pro-Am 64. And they were going to like explain it as like Timber, who was the lead of the game at the time, and all the other animal friends were actually driving around little RC versions of themselves in all these vehicles. And that thing was jettisoned when it became Diddy Kong Racing, and they were just actually in the karts and hovercraft and planes. But yeah, like, it wasn't going to have the Donkey Kong license at the time, although there might have been some Donkey Kong elements in it, because as much as some people say this was never the plan, they were kind of building a shared universe into it at the time. But they showed this behind the scenes to Nintendo, I think at E3 97, and Miyamoto in particular loved it. And I don't know if it was broached then or when Banjo-Kazooie was delayed, but it was like, okay, this game could be our big flagship for the holiday instead of Banjo-Kazooie, but you need to put a Donkey Kong character as the lead. And I think they offered up Donkey or Diddy, and Rare chose Diddy because he was theirs. And yeah, the rest is history.
It's more fitting of the game to be Diddy anyway. It's a bit more kid feeling, you know. You mentioned like the Disneyland sort of thing. Of course there's the what's up with the children laughing in the intro.
The Diddy laugh.
Yeah,
the Diddy laugh. It's Tim Stamper's kids.
Oh, okay. That's sweet.
And a sample.
I was gonna say,
it's like a combined.
Yeah, Tim Stamper's kids do feature into it, but the most iconic part of the, like, what most people think of the Diddy laugh when the Rare logo comes down and you hear that giggle, which I actually sent over a sample of it. I don't know if you want to play it. It's actually an old Hollywood sound sample from the early 20th century. Somebody did a great article on this a couple of years back. They tracked down the Diddy laugh and the history because it pops up in everything. If you'll be watching a movie or a TV show and you'll hear children laughing in the distance, chances are it's the Diddy laugh. It's like the Wilhelm scream. It's just an old Hollywood sound sample that gets used and reused. And because of the prominence at the very beginning of Diddy Kong Racing, it's become mostly identified with this game. And one of our readers a few years back, goes by the name Red Crested Breagle, sent me the actual like clean sound sample of it. I was like, yes, please, I want this. And so it's in our archives, and I break it out whenever I want to freak people out.
Yeah, I love just having the high quality version of it. I really appreciate that. Well, it sucks. It sucks for all the RC Pro-Am fans. You know, they're much like you should put yourself in their shoes as a Donkey Kong fan.
That game is from that weird era where Rare was just like churning stuff out for the NES, and like half of it was just total garbage. Like RC Pro-Am is not one of the worst, but just it was real anarchic, like just make as many games as possible. And the music is maybe good, but the game itself is just drawing tarot cards. Like what? But yeah, also there's that what's that tiger character's name again?
Timber.
Because he kind of got Timber. He was supposed to be the star of this game, and then they're like, no, Diddy Kong, and then they're like, okay, that's fine. We're going to make a 3D platformer, and he'll be the star of that one, and it'll be called Dinosaur Planet. And then Nintendo just, I think Miyamoto just hates Timber the Tiger, because then they came in and were like, how about it's Star Fox instead of this tiger who I hate? And they're like, all right, yeah, we'll make a really bad Zelda game with Star Fox in it. No problem.
I think he must think it's too scary.
He's a tiger. It's very frightening.
Timber is cursed, unfortunately. He's always in somebody else's, another Nintendo character's shadow. He's technically a Rare character. That's a whole thing we can get into, the rights issues behind all of this. But we just come to find out the other. It was 1 year ago, actually. Ed Bryan. Now at Playtonic, he joined Rare with the Banjo-Kazooie team. He posted on social media this like master plan for think it was E3 98, and he was just like, look at all these plans we have for Banjo-Kazooie. Or it was E3 97, excuse me. Look at all these plans we have for Banjo-Kazooie. And in this, there is the inadvertent reveal of, like, maybe it was 98, I'm sorry. But there's the inadvertent reveal that Dinosaur Planet started life as Dino Island. And it was going to be a very direct, like, full-fledged sequel to Diddy Kong Racing, where Timber time travels back to prehistoric times, and it kind of explains where the dinosaurs came from on Timber's Island. And he was going to befriend the boss character Tricky of the first world. He was going to befriend the boss character Tricky as a kid. And they'd be jumping back and forth in time. And that is why in Star Fox Adventures, to the very end, one of the sole remaining characters is a dinosaur sidekick named Tricky.
Yeah. God, that dinosaur gave me such bad memories.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait to litigate Star Fox Adventures.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other console.
I'm sure we'll play that at some point. We'll do something with that.
yeah, we'll get to it in our Star Fox.
I mean, it's series. A very important game in sort of internet history for reasons that I'm sure the designers couldn't have anticipated when they were.
Someone anticipated it,
or
some.
Yeah. Someone definitely anticipated it.
With Timber though, he is like definitely he took second fiddle to Diddy here, but he is kind of the main character of the game, it seems. Like, or at least like the stuff that's happening.
There's a plot which I didn't realize until today. That's in the manual, because we were still in that era when some games just like were like, I guess we have like a couple cutscenes. If you want to know the frame story, you have to like read the manual. And yeah, it's like his island, his parents have left to go on vacation, and they leave him on the island.
Yeah.
And then this pig tries to like take over the island, and he's like, oh, I have to hire a bunch of racers to race this pig to save my home.
It feels very like Space Jam type.
Space Jam meets Home Alone.
Diddy Kong.
Yeah, it's what I love. What I love about the plot, though, because it's nonsense. It's the dumbest thing, but the fact that it has a plot at all, and that we live on this island that is famous for its racetracks. So, okay.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And we're going to go to Donkey Kong Island to visit our friends, the Kongs, for our holiday. So we're putting you in charge, Timber. Make sure nothing bad happens to our beloved racetracks. And at that point, there's an alien invasion by an intergalactic despot named Whizpig. And he basically brainwashes the 4 biggest characters on the island and turns the champion racer into a frog. Spoilers. And then Timber has to like write to his friend Diddy Kong, who is this big video game hero, to help like fix this problem. It's not his problem. I mean, how could his parents blame him for this? And there's an alien pig wizard who came down from space and enslaved everyone. Like, that's not your fault. You're just a kid.
Right.
Maybe it's... I don't know. Maybe there's something else he doesn't want the parents to discover. That it's like, if they come back with this, it's going to cost too much.
He threw a huge party, and like that's the only reason Whizpig even knew about the island. Was he's heard about the party, he showed up, and he's like, this is a pretty nice place, I'm going to take it over.
I still think, though, think of all the games we've played lately. Like, some have good, some good stuff, like, in the manual, and some sort of, like... But a lot of games we're playing at the from around the era we're in don't really have too much going on. So it was kind of cool to read that stuff in the manual, but it was also okay to play the game without it. It didn't really matter. You're like, there's the evil wizard pig.
Yeah,
sure.
I love the bit where you race the boss characters, and then like after the first race, they're for like a short period of time they break out of the curse. They're like, oh, here's a challenge for you, and then they just go back to being cursed again.
They get cursed again? I thought the second time was like for fun.
They're like still cursed because you don't get the amulet till after the second time. They like become lucid long enough to issue a challenge for you.
They fight off the space wizardry long enough to tell you, like, just complete this one more race, and then I'll give you the amulet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I don't have much time, but here are some silver coins.
I'm pretty sure the curse doesn't break until you beat Wizpig for the last time, because they're not at the party. The bosses aren't at the first party, but they're at the second party.
On the beach.
So,
yeah. It's such like a weird story to like it's obvious that like, okay, it's a racing game, and then they're like, okay, well, let's come up with a story. And it's funny just because I feel like this is something that happens in video games and like, you know, cartoons and stuff a lot, where it's like you want the characters to be doing something and you come up with this like bizarre reason why they're doing it. It's like, oh, we have to race the evil wizard pig who can enslave the minds of our greatest champions at will, because then he'll leave. If we beat him in a race, he will go away. It's not like you're fighting him off. He's just like so shamed by the loss in a race.
He's a good sport.
I guess I have to go back to my home planet now for 5 months, and then I will return.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I guess a lot of things are settled like that. Like Mortal Kombat, you know, they're like, whoever wins, like wins 7 of these in a row, and then you can take over the world. It's like,
that's true. Yeah, I suppose that's true. Although in Annihilation, you know, Shao Kahn's just like, I'm tired of this. Like, we're just gonna do it for real.
It does make you wonder, like, why can't they just do that?
Yeah, well, because you need to collect all, because then there would be no pretense for collecting all of the stuff. And my God, is there a lot of stuff to collect in this game?
Yeah,
it's like, it's such a, like, you know, Banjo-Kazooie isn't out yet, but you can see where the Collectathon starts here. And I guess it starts in the Super Nintendo Donkey Kong games where there's like all of the coins and stuff. But wow, it's like all the things that are to collect in this game. Like there's gold balloons, there's keys that unlock challenge courses, I think. There's Wizpig amulets, there's TT amulet pieces. I think I'm missing something. Like there's so much stuff that you have to find. And then when you get all of it, it's like your reward is, hey, do you want to play all the levels like mirrored?
Yeah, I actually think like most of that stuff, you know, I think it's like there's enough variety in all of that it doesn't ever feel like, I don't know, I didn't feel like, relatively there's not a lot of like balloons, so I didn't feel too like overwhelmed by that. But then when you beat it and they're like, do you want to do it again? I was like, not right now, I don't think. But
like at the time, I feel like it was kind of the expectation that you would just almost bloat your game with stuff because games were so expensive. And I mean, people talk about how games are expensive now, but if you look at inflation, they were actually more expensive, I think, in the 90s. And it wasn't like there were like Steam sales or anything. So, and also people's attention wasn't pulled in a million directions by streaming services and all these things. So like retail releases had to have stuff like that, where it was like, as a kid, you were excited, right? To be like, wow, there's more game. Even though it's just flipped backwards, it's like, wow, there's more stuff to do. And I don't have to go back to the crushing boredom of, you know, being alone with my thoughts.
It feels a little bit more, yeah, like compared to some other games we played, like some of the extra stuff they'll put in there, it's a little more like rewarding or like satisfying to play. Like I think all the Rare games have sort of had that. Like like GoldenEye has a ton of extra, you know, you can play on the different levels and like beat the time to unlock things, and like Blast Corps had all this extra stuff you could do.
Yeah, Blast Corps has just an insane amount of extra stuff.
And this compared to some of the racing games we've done, where it's like, and I, you know, different things go into making that compared to this, but you'd play a lot of games we have played would be like 3 racetracks, and then maybe they're mirrored, or like they make it less foggy or more foggy, or some more foggy typically. But
you drive around the opposite direction. Yeah.
Whereas like this one, it had like a crazy amount of courses, and I could definitely see like putting a lot more time into this than, like, when I think of Mario Kart 64, when I was a kid, I almost never played that on my own. But I could actually see going, like, well, I just did. I went through it and played through it, and it was a pretty good time.
A lot of very distinct courses too.
Yeah, that's true too. Some of the other games we've played recently it's been like, here's city fog level, you know. There's nice variety of worlds and courses. Even like they have kind of like the hub worlds that have like a similar vibe, but even within those, they differentiate themselves pretty well. And like also like having the different type of vehicles makes it feel different, especially in the levels where you can like do them with a different vehicle. Just endless things to do. And I also thought doing like the things like the silver coin challenges were pretty fun, because they sort of in some of the levels they sort of showed me aspects of the level that I wouldn't have tried to do, and it was fun to like you had to like get a little bit better at racing the track to actually pull it off. And so it was cool. It was kind of like some of the other racing games we've played, it'll be like you play on easy and it's no big deal, you beat it, it's done, and then you switch up to hard and it's just really really difficult. Whereas like I feel like this kind of helps you like step up to another level and like gives you like kind of a goal to shoot for that's not like just like get better at racing games. You know, it like kind of trains you a little bit.
It also,
I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it also helps that the AI doesn't rubber band like in Mario Kart, so you really feel like you're not being punished for racing well, and so it's something you feel like you're not wasting time just sinking hours into it trying to learn the layouts of the tracks, and then you just get passed by Toad at the very last
and you don't really get like blue shelled or something like that. That's one thing I can see.
Yeah, well, I actually think the implementation of items in Diddy Kong Racing is much more interesting than Mario Kart, especially Mario Kart 64, but probably most of them, because there's really just like there's like 5, I think, kinds of balloons, 4 or 5, and picking up a second one of the type that you already have basically upgrades it, right? So there's incentive to, like, there's a trade-off, right? There's actual thought going into it of like, okay, do I like hold on to this and try to grab another one to get like a homing rocket or a bigger boost, or do I just burn it right away? And also, if you hit a balloon that doesn't match your color, you lose whatever you had before. Whereas in Mario Kart, it's kind of brainless. Like, you're just basically driving through question mark boxes, and they don't really stack. Later on, you can hold 2 at a time, but that's about as complex as it gets. And that's one aspect where I feel like that series has always kind of like lagged behind other kart racing games. It's like you see games like Diddy Kong Racing doing things like this, and the Mario Kart's just sort of stuck with what it's basically always done. And it makes things like a little more interesting, even though there are like fewer items overall. I don't know. I just like that aspect of it.
It seems like something they'd probably like with Mario Kart. It's probably like why most people like that I know remember it more, and why it's one that can be gone back to more with like, you know, more like, I don't know, not casual, but maybe people who haven't played a lot of games since 64 is like the rubber banding in Mario Kart is like a feature for them, you know, like it balances it a little bit. Like you can play,
for sure.
We can play Mario Kart with my parents and they do really bad still, but they feel like they're having fun, you know? So I can see like Diddy Kong Racing might be a harder sell because you can't get that. No, there's no bullet bill.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of catch-up mechanics in Diddy Kong Racing, whereas in Mario Kart, those are like pretty built in.
Yeah, maybe if you know some of the secrets or something like that. But Hyle, for you were against some of these rare games they announced at the time, but did this game help you like come to know some of them and like love some of them ahead of time?
Oh, absolutely. This is the genesis
Okay.
of the Rare Shared Universe. Because, like I said, I think there was some of this baked into it even when it was Pro-Am 64. But they really just went all in when the fates aligned and Banjo-Kazooie got delayed and this game took its place, because this then served as the introduction of the character of Banjo and the character of Conker and a few other characters who have figured in relatively minor roles throughout Rare's games over the next couple of decades. But yeah, so the way, like, of course I pored over the instruction manual. I'm one of those kids who had to read the instruction manual front and back before I played a game, because I had to know exactly what was happening in this world. And so getting the little character biographies and the game's plot, where it's established that, oh, Conker is this friend of Diddy Kong that he met on an adventure with Donkey Kong. And you're like, whoa. And then Banjo, same. But then Diddy Kong sends Squawks the Parrot to Banjo's house in Spiral Mountain to recruit him in this struggle against the tyrannical Wizpig. And you're just like, whoa! Like, this was probably the best way to get me on board with Banjo-Kazooie and Conker, because it just made them backdoor Donkey Kong spin-offs. And yeah, like, at that point, I was just all in on anything Rare did, because there was the chance it could all intertwine in this kind of nebulous shared reality. And this is before, like, shared universes were in vogue, right? Like, comic books,
yeah,
of course, but outside of some, like, very basic, like, network sitcoms, like, oh yeah, Urkel's showing up in Full House. Oh wow, yeah, whoa. You know, aside from that, you didn't really see a whole lot of this during that era. It wasn't until really the MCU that made it more mainstream outside of the geek culture that everybody's tried to get in on that train. But yeah, they were doing it in 1997, and for the longest time, when you went on Rare's website, which launched couple months after this in 1998, like, you would get character biographies for different Rare characters. And for Conker, the first sentence was, unlike his good friend Diddy Kong, or just like his good friend Diddy Kong or something. But that's how they introduced Conker on Rare's website, is Diddy Kong's good friend. And I remember that quite a bit when Conker's Bad Fur Day was announced as the evolution of 12 Tales Conker 64. But yeah, like, this was really, I think, the inciting factor that made me, like, really like Donkey Kong as a kid, and me realizing, I'm probably really gonna like Donkey Kong as an adult too. Damn it.
That's awesome. Yeah, for you, McKenna, it's like almost like the reverse. You've played no Donkey Kong Country. We'll probably do some co-op Donkey Kong Country. That's not probably. I feel like that's almost a requisite.
Inevitable.
Yeah,
we're like making our way through the Nintendo IPs.
Yeah, there's some that you haven't really experienced that you've had your eye on, and I think we were both really into the. Obviously, Donkey Kong is a classic, but for you, this is almost like setting the table for a lot of the characters we're going to encounter, because I don't think you played any of the Rare games on N64 either. So
no, yeah, I had like heard of Banjo-Kazooie. I didn't know he was in this game before, so I was like, oh, he's got
it's that guy from
a little
Smash.
appearance before, yeah. It is a little weird to just have like this whole cast of characters, and I'm like, who are all these people?
Yeah, it's much different than like Mario Kart. Well, I guess at some point that's how it was too, because you weren't much of a Mario.
Well, Mario Kart was like my first video game ever. Mario Kart 64.
Yeah, that's where all the characters are from.
Yeah. Weird first exposure to everything.
Yeah.
But fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that's true for especially for that game. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. Do you think, is there any character in here you're like, I want to know more about this one, other than what we got in the manual? They could have a game, or they could not, I guess.
Maybe like the turtle guy and the
the
bunny.
The turtle
Those
and
guys.
the bunny. Oh, the
It's a bunny, yeah.
the little mouse, right? Yeah.
Yes. Rodent.
Those were our close enough.
Yeah.
Those were our go-tos.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think I usually played as the turtle as Tip Top.
Mm-hmm.
I like his little voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Tip Top.
Of course, Tip Top gets fleshed out a little bit more in some
Ooh.
N64 games to come.
See, I did not know that. Well, actually, we saw something about that recently, but didn't know Tip Top came back. I really thought it was
He's
only...
like, yeah, he's one of the few that does, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the rest of them are kind of just like forgotten. But yeah, like I don't know, what the cast is like just a bunch of random animal guys, right? But I do like that there's a Kremlin character. It's just unfortunate that he is dog shit. Like he is like by far the worst character in the game. It's kind of impressive how they were just like, what if we just made a guy who sucks and like is unplayable in every aspect? But he's just like there because he followed Diddy Kong, I guess.
Yeah, he's just there to spy on the Kongs and to make sure they're not up to any anti-Kremlin plots on this racing island being occupied by Despot Pig.
So he's like kind of okay
Checks
with
out.
the idea of getting rid of Wizpig. Like I'll go along with it as long as there's no anti-Kremlin situation.
Yeah, and I think the implication is he eventually comes to like the other characters because he's in the conga line at the very end with Banjo and Tip Top.
He has a come to Jesus moment.
He's like, you know what? This anti-Diddy Kong propaganda I have been fed since I was recruited as a child soldier. It's all lies. It's all lies. And I'm staying here on Timbers Island.
Yeah, he defects to the west. I mean, to the...
It's sort of like
Island.
when... Well, I was going to say John Cena, but really like anybody in the Fast saga, any villain, they eventually kind of win over to their side through the power of racing and whatever. So,
which is funny because Rare's tried to get another kart racer going for so many years, and a game title they reused twice for projects that never amounted to anything was The Fast and the Furriest. So
okay,
it's all connected.
Yeah. I feel like there's always some moment with whenever we're discussing one of their games where someone goes like, okay. It's usually with music or something where it gets like kind of what's the word? I don't know. It gets a little too cute for itself, a little too sweet. But that's good.
Tip Top was going to be in the first iteration of The Fast and the Furious, which is kind of an early like motion sports game, but it never saw the light of day.
But wait, like a Kinect thing?
It was for the Xbox camera before the Kinect, and I just think it was too ahead of its time because this is like way before that technology was ready. But yeah, there was going to be like a game where you actually bowled with Tip Top. You picked him up. And yeah.
Oh,
Because I have to point out that a game that putting a turtle in a game called The Fast and the Furious,
that's fucked up.
it's neither of those things. So maybe that's why it was canceled. That's all I'm saying.
I like the idea of bowling with him. Yeah, that is ahead of its time.
That was going to be for the Xbox 360. So like Tip Top has he's been just like most of this cast, he's tried to get a revival going and he can never quite get there. Bumper the Badger has had a sordid history since.
Oh,
Diddy Kong
he's
Racing.
in jail, I read.
He's out of jail now,
Sorry?
apparently. But yes, so according to the marketing campaign for Conker Live and Reloaded, Conker mentioned that one of the Diddy Kong Racing
God.
cast members is in jail. And this lore was fleshed out then over the next few years in ancillary materials for Rare Games and on their website. We eventually learned it was Bumper, and it was for indecent exposure.
Doesn't surprise me. Does not
Wow.
surprise me. There's something about that guy.
TT
okay,
the Stopwatch was in an early build of Sea of Thieves. If we just want to keep rattling them off.
Yeah,
Wow.
So yeah, he was an in-game ship trinket you could hang on a wall or whatever. He's just there in the game hanging out. This was the very rudimentary build of Sea of Thieves, but for some reason TT was in it, and despite my pestering of Rare every single week since the game is launched, they have not put him in the actual commercial release.
I think this is like a "Where Are They Now" segment, basically.
I could keep going. I could
So what happened to the elephant?
oh well.
He's kind of problematic.
Times have changed. Now, he was going to be in Donkey Kong Racing, the scrapped semi-sequel for the GameCube that would have seen primarily the Donkey Kong cast riding like animal steeds as their mode of transportation.
Oh.
But he was going to be one of the playable characters in it. And, of course, that didn't come to fruition. And when he came back for Diddy Kong Racing DS in 2007, they changed his voice, thankfully. He just speaks like a proper Englishman now instead of the very affected Apu-like accent, which, you know, it's for the best because, yeah, that hasn't aged well, has
Yeah. It kind of, I don't know if this is like me thinking bad about them, but it kind of surprises me, like, even when you say 2007, I thought like they might not have changed it for that. But
Yeah, that's like a little like it's like that's still well ahead of like the Apu Reckoning on The Simpsons and everything, right? Like that's like a full like almost decade ahead of that, I think.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So I mean, thankfully,
guess
like,
good for them.
unfortunately, it's in the inferior version of Diddy Kong Racing. So like nobody enjoys the DS version more than the original
Yeah.
S64.
oh yes, we haven't played that. We have talked to someone about coming on to discuss that at some point, but okay, it's the inferior version.
It's like they were doing a lot of N64 ports to the DS around the time, and I feel like by 2008 the kind of novelty had worn off of like, wow, an N64 game on a portable console, and also it just wasn't very good. Like the touchscreen controls were kind of not great, and it was like didn't look as good, didn't sound as good. The one interesting thing about that port that I know of is I was watching all of the commercials for both versions of the game today. And obviously, you know, the N64 ones, the Japanese commercial is just like an excited voice telling you about the game over lots of footage and a little bit of like cartoon graphics, which are pretty cute. The American ad is like, this ain't drag racing. It's Diddy Kong. Like, you know, just like, this is rough riding, balloon grabbing, coin snatching, boss beating, rumble pack ready, race and adventure. And it's like, okay, America, like, all right, this isn't right. This is what you think of America, huh?
That's so similar to the Mischief Makers.
It's exactly like, yeah, it's so funny. But then by the time you get to the DS versions, there were separate ads for the US and Canada, and they're almost identical, but the line reads are slightly different, where like the US one is still doing that in like 2007. It's still doing the like, yeah, it's 2007. Prince of Persia, Warrior Within just came out. So we're back in like hardcore mode. And then the Canadian one's like a little more pleasant. And I was like, did they make a separate ad for the Canadian audience where they were like, we can't go as hard because these are gentle people who value peace? Like, it's so bizarre that there was this different one that was only slightly different. Like, video is all the same. Dialogue is mostly the same, just like Diddy Kong Racing. It's out now.
I feel like that's kind of rude to the Canadians a little bit.
I mean,
be like, you can't handle
all
it.
of these. They're all playing on broad national stereotypes, so I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
Americans are boorish and uncouth. Canadians are overly apologetic, and Japanese people are just like to see what the actual goddamn video game is about, I guess.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. I always go back to this, but it reminds me of there was one of the Nintendo Power VHS tapes we watched where there's a trailer, whatever, promo part of it where they're talking about Yoshi's Island, and they're playing Machine Head by Bush. It's like,
yeah, that's about the right tone.
What, we got away a little bit from the game itself, controls wise. There was one thing I wanted to mention that I think set it aside, that made it even better than Mario Kart, was I think the actual drifting in this game works really well. Mm-hmm. Whereas like I can get into that in like the newer Mario Kart games, but Mario Kart 64 I cannot figure out how to do it properly, and so I just don't. But in this, it was really cool. You have a lot of control over it. Like, you can do like a softer one and then hit B to do like an even tighter drift, and that was really satisfying. And it definitely was like what caused me to like keep pushing on like some of the harder tracks to actually beat it. It was very satisfying control style.
Yeah, I think playing as a kid, like, I didn't even know. I don't think I knew that Mario Kart 64 had drifting.
It's not intuitive,
you could just
I don't
play.
think.
You didn't need it, really.
Yeah, not really.
But, yeah, maybe that makes it, like, more, like, little, like, my age when I played it friendly, because I could just, move the control stick around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and
it's, like, more step up.
Yeah, you don't
have
a
to... little more complex.
Yeah, I feel like this game kind of walks the line pretty well of, like, it can be pretty competitively played, I would assume, but yeah, it's pretty approachable. Mm-hmm. Like, most of the levels we played, like, you raced them the first time, and I don't think we really had, there's a couple we had some trouble with. But
I remember one point doing a race and being like, oh, that was really hard. And then I went like the next highest balloon one, and it was so easy. And
yeah.
I was like, oh, were they just giving me a little break? Just a little ease up on the difficulty?
It might have been. I feel like the actual, I don't know if everyone else feels this way, but like, the final level before you find out there's like more to the game, before you go to space, I found that stuff to be like the hardest stuff in the game. And then like the space like levels I didn't find like too challenging, and I didn't know if that was like more of a like here's a victory lap type thing or something, or if they even really, if there was like a progression in mind. But overall I got the sense that the game, like from world to world, got harder in difficulty. But Hyle, I don't know, what do you think about that as someone who's probably spent a lot of time playing the game?
So I really can't speak to the difficulty, because I remember at the time it all kind of felt, yeah, definitely Dragon Force, the fourth world, was probably the most difficult, although I would say like Future Funland, the bonus world that you unlock via the lighthouse, I think that was maybe a little bit less challenging. But what really sticks in my mind is trying to unlock TT by doing all the time trials and kind of beating his ghost around the track. That was the most difficult thing I had ever done in a video game up until that point in my life. And the day I finally unlocked him, I felt like I could accomplish anything. It was probably the last time I felt good about myself.
Oh no. I'll have to try that sometime. It was along with Adventure 2. It was like when we finished the game, it was sort of like, okay, I think we played a lot. It felt like, it was a good time to stop. But that's, I don't know if that's something I don't know. It seems too hard.
It'd be a good thing to revisit. You know, we've revisited a lot of the games.
Yeah, and we've been able to do that a lot with some of our friends online will stream some games, and with the NSO like feature of being able to like crossplay with people is cool. And this is one game that I really wish, you know, they would actually add to that, so we could we didn't I'm sure it's a big thing. I don't know if all the Donkey Kong Land games were feeding you well, but
yeah, those just came out, huh?
Yeah, we could really use that because we played a little bit of multiplayer, but I think it really shines with 4 players. So I'd like to be able to do that with like my brother and Matt and all our other friends online. That'd be cool. Sorry, Hyle, you're upset about this. I know.
Well, I'm not upset. There's. It seems silly because there's so many other things to worry about in the world right now, other than when will Diddy Kong Racing show up on Nintendo Switch Online. Plus expansion
in this
pack.
moment, it can be.
But like I said, I try to glom onto anything that can derive joy out of this existence, and Diddy Kong Racing is one of them. No, you spoke earlier on this episode about how Mario Kart 64 is kind of held up as like the gold standard of that era. And I think Diddy Kong Racing, because Diddy Kong Racing was huge when it came out. I know huge for the N64, but it did briefly hold the Guinness World Record for most reserved games at that point in time. So, like it was pretty prominent, but it didn't retain its place in the culture, at least the culture of Nintendo fandom, because of the legal issues that have kind of kept it in limbo for the last almost 25 years, because it was only on store shelves for 4 years or so, like less than 4 years, because and some of this is anecdotal, but when Conker's Bad Fur Day came out, Nintendo was very, very leery about like having Diddy Kong Racing on the shelves at the time to kind of serve as this gateway drug to the lurid Bad Fur Day. They didn't want to upset any of their consumers and their family-friendly image. So Diddy Kong Racing got pulled from shelves, and this was 2001. I mean, N64 games were on their way out anyway, but then
Sure.
But then, of course, a year after that, Nintendo declines to purchase Rare. Rare looks for other buyers. Microsoft buys Rare. Diddy Kong Racing was very unique in the Nintendo Rare canon because Diddy Kong Racing is not a Nintendo game. Not technically. Diddy Kong Racing is a Rare game. It was their first published game. Nintendo licensed them the name Diddy Kong, the character Diddy Kong, the character Crunch because he is a Kremling, and at the time the character Banjo because Nintendo had an ownership stake in Banjo-Kazooie. So those 3 characters at the time were owned or partially owned by Nintendo. Everybody else is a Rare IP. So when they went with Microsoft, those characters went with them, and Diddy Kong Racing basically became unreleasable. And that's why in Diddy Kong Racing DS, which is a Nintendo-published game, Rare licensed all of their characters to Nintendo for that game. It's so confusing, and I love it. It's just my favorite, crazy trivia. Because of Tricky's role in Star Fox Adventures and the, roundabout way that goes back to Diddy Kong Racing, that's a character Nintendo arguably owns, and the Star Fox version of Tricky did show up again in Star Fox Assault. But yeah, it's a tangled web, and thankfully Nintendo and Rare have a working relationship again, and that's why we're getting Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, even the Donkey Kong games, which Nintendo has ownership of. They always have to clear with Rare and Microsoft to re-release them on a platform like NSO. So the Donkey Kong Land trilogy, even though it's to be expected, it was still like a little victory. It was like, yay, because it's just one step closer to getting Diddy Kong Racing back on a Nintendo system, like the original Diddy Kong Racing for the first time since the turn of the century.
So it could happen. That's what you're saying.
Oh yeah, I would be
It
astounded.
seems like a
if it didn't.
no-brainer.
Yeah, it's like at this point, there's nothing holding it back. Like, who cares that Conker's in it? Like, at this point, you know, even Bad Fur Day could wind up on NSO now that they have the mature app.
Mature,
So,
yeah.
Mm.
I need more
Yeah,
games
they need
for
to
that.
fill that out.
Yeah.
There's like what three games on
Wait,
there.
what's on there?
Turok,
Perfect Dark.
Shadow Man.
Shadow Man?
Is that on
Oh
there?
my god.
I might be making that up. I don't know.
I haven't subscribed to Switch Online for like a year or two at this point, so I'm just like occasionally we'll pop in and be like, oh wow, they added Big Run, the Jaleco port of the Super Famicom game. Wow, that's great. Like, what other Jaleco and other defunct publishers, developers, libraries do they have access to at this point? So whenever they add like a real game that someone has played, it's like, oh my god.
I know. I feel like such a, because I know there's like issues with you know, having just the only way to get these on the service and all that stuff. I feel like such a bozo being like, come on, please put these on the service. But it is like, for us, like just for our purposes and actually playing, like I'm sure there's probably
It's
ways
nice to
with, like,
have
emulators or whatever.
Obviously,
to, like,
anyone who cares and has any technical know-how can emulate all this stuff, but it is nice to have access to it in like on a Switch with like online features like, built in and everything.
Just being able to play with my brother is like it's cool. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the one reason they're not putting it is maybe Nintendo is jealous that Rare outclassed them basically within the same year of kart racing games, and they've been holding it down ever since.
I will say though that, like, looking back, most people I think like Diddy Kong Racing, and I think Mario Kart 64 has suffered a little bit by comparison to the later titles, but I think most people generally have like fond memories of it. At the time, the reception, like the critical reception, was like not unanimous to either of those games. Like, Jeff Gerstmann gave Diddy Kong Racing a pretty bad review for GameSpot back, you know, when it came out, and was just like, this game shouldn't have come out this early. It's better than Mario Kart 64, which he hated. Like, he gave he gave a really bad review to 64, and was like, this is better than that, but it's still like really repetitive, and it's just like another kart racer. So it's funny how things like develop over time, and like now we're like, oh, Diddy Kong, you know, Racing is a classic. I mean, I think it's sold really well, and like its target audience really loved it at the time, and now that they've grown up and are looking back on it, they're like, oh, this is great. But some of the, you know, adult critics, or even like, you know, early 20s critics at the time who were playing it were like, this isn't it. And whether that was because there was sort of you know, we were in that period where people were, you know, older teens, and people were wanting more like, quote, mature games, and there was this kind of backlash against Nintendo's whole aesthetic and the Nintendo 64 more broadly. Maybe it was because of that, or maybe it was just because they were adults and like we're seeing more clearly than we were as children, I guess. And now it's impossible to like unsee these games the way that we did when we were kids, and so we're always going to be kind of fond of them. That said, I do think it's still a pretty good kart racing game.
Yeah, Gerstmann's he's like like we'll listen to a lot of movie podcasts or whatever, and like you know, like certain ones will like quote like the same critics over and over, like Roger Ebert or something like that. So many people on this show, it's like, well, Gerstmann said this at the time.
Well, it's like how many other games critics or games people who are still working today were writing about games 30 years ago, right? Like, not a ton. So I feel like he's the kind of a go-to for a lot of people.
Yeah.
For that reason. But yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Jeff Gerstmann.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Okay. I feel like obviously there's so much going on in the game. I do want to throw in really quick. We talked about, like the adventure aspect of it, and like the hub world is really cool. But one thing that like kind of blew my mind was like when you come out of a level and Raj is like, all right, now let's race around the island, and like making the island into a course was a really cool feature. Like, I feel like that's the one thing I appreciate about it, is I feel like they got all they could out of it at the time. And that, I guess that's how for me, I see it in like a contrasting way to like, they shouldn't have released this type reviews that like, and again, yeah, maybe it is like the way I saw it at the time, but it's like they used every aspect of like all the levels and all the worlds and like jam-packed it full of stuff compared to, you know, plenty of the other games we played. Is there anything else, any other notes you had for the game, McKenna, that you want to add before we go?
Maybe just mention the challenge modes. There were like a few sort of battle style. There's one like the Mario Kart battle mode where you use your power-ups and just kind of want to be the last guy standing.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And then a couple other... There's one where you have to like collect bananas. And I played it once and like the bananas respawn. So I just found a spot where that was really close to where I had to put them. And it took about the time for me to drive there and back for them to respawn.
Yeah, some of those were like, they seem like they would be more fun again with like 4 players because you can like actually attack each other.
More, yeah.
But yeah, the AI in these for those games isn't really, they're not putting up much of a fight.
I did think the egg one was cool.
Yeah, the egg one's pretty cool too.
Grabbing eggs and letting them hatch.
Again, more like varied multiplayer. This is one of the most varied games we've played on the system, and we've kind of been tracking what games can be played like fully 4-player and like actually have like cool features. And this one, this might be the best one. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess we didn't. In Mario Kart 64, if you're playing with 4 players, the music, the track music doesn't play.
Yeah, that game starts to fall. Well, yeah.
I think that's in the frame rate drop too, or...
Oh yeah,
I think so. Cruising USA, that definitely happened. Well, that you can't even go 4-player.
Most split screen games, it starts to get pretty bad.
Yeah, I guess we didn't fully play this one with 4-player on the hardware. We need to get a couple
other people.
We don't have that many friends anymore. IRL. We're all through the screen.
Spoken like a true Diddy Kong Racing fan right there. No. There's a lovely community around this game and the greater Donkey Kong Rare fandom. It's international. It's so delightful to find like Japanese fans doing fan art of Diddy Kong Racing to this day. Like, for all of the ills of social media, it's done a wonderful job at showing me how beloved this game is around the world. And because there's this misnomer, I think, because Rare was a UK studio, still is a UK studio, but these games are only popular in the West and they're not popular in Japan and no, like they may not be as big, but they still have loyal followings everywhere. And it's, like I said, I really want it to come out to NSO because I really want this game to kind of retake its place in the canon a little bit, the canon of Nintendo. It was such an important game for Nintendo in like the Pokemon releasing in the West and Ocarina of Time, like defining 1998. Like this was like what the N64 revolved around for a good solid 6 months or so. So it kind of breaks my heart that it's been forgotten to the extent that it has, or just memory hold because of the legal issues. So, you know, if it does come out on NSO, you will know it because you will hear me shrieking through the night and you'll know that it's only good news.
That's gonna be a big moment when it happens.
I've already got like GIFs loaded and ready to go. Like I already got like little videos made and like notes for podcasts, and like I've got like weeks worth of content I'm ready to roll out. They just have to give me permission.
Please. Well, before one final thing we should mention is the music in the game is awesome. David Wise, I believe, did he do the whole soundtrack? I'm pretty sure.
Like there might have been some errant sound effects and stuff he didn't do, but like I think Graham Norgate did a little bit, but I think it was mostly David Wise.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, great soundtrack. I love how it does the thing of like for certain songs, like changing depending of where you are, like the context, changing music, like in the overworld, or like with the character select screen, like they have their own little unique instrument. It kind of helps, like you kind of
Gives them a little personality.
Yeah, that and like their little voices. Actually, they do a really good job, I think, of conveying the characters' personalities through just like and like their little tunes, you know.
It's the first time like all these characters speak. Like the first time you ever hear Diddy talk. The only time you hear Banjo speak English, by the way. It's in this Banjo.
Oh,
it's Chris Sutherland who does his guttural noises in the Banjo series, but he's actually speaking complete phrases here.
Well, you can also, of course, hear Diddy speak in the Donkey Kong Country cartoon.
Not canon.
Yep.
Not canon.
They're real. Yeah, you're welcome, world, for that one. That was a Canadian production.
Yeah, his voice is actually pretty upsetting in that one, I think. But
I mean, it's all upsetting. It's all the way down. It's upsetting.
it has certain things I like about it, but that's for another time, I think.
Get out of my way, 'cause Diddy's coming through.
Let's see, Merritt, is there anything else you wanted to say about the game before we wrap it up?
I mean, it still is very unique, I feel like, as a kart racer. The only games that I can think of that kind of compare to it, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on kart racing, but, you know, I feel like it took until Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing transformed. I never remember the full title of that game because it's absurd, but
So
that
many
was
terms.
like, yeah, I feel like it took until that point for a developer to sort of try this similar kind of thing of like, let's have like hovercraft and cars and planes, and even in that, you just sort of like transform for certain sections of the course rather than being able to pick different things at the beginning. So the courses are built more like, it was sort of easier, I feel like, rather than the design challenge of building a track that could be navigated with 3 different vehicles. And then this is a weird pull, but the Wacky Racers Dreamcast game is kind of similar in that it has this overworld and you're like driving into different levels and doing things like that. And that's the only other car racer that I can ever remember playing that had like this sort of overworld set up to it where you're like getting trophies and stuff. And I kind of wonder whether they just were directly ripping off Diddy Kong Racing, like in retrospect, almost certainly. So yeah, it's still like very unique. And yeah, I kind of wanted to like get back into like, I was like playing it a little bit and like reading up on it for this, but then I was like, kind of want to just like replay this game and see if I could beat it, because I don't think I ever, I didn't own it as a kid, and I don't know that I ever got that far in it, so it'd be cool to try it. I have no sense of whether or not it would be like childishly easy or just like unbelievably difficult, because with this era I feel like it's kind of a toss up.
I think between level to level, it can be, honestly, like, there's some that I did, like, actually, most of them were fairly easy, and then there were just a couple that I don't know, you probably saw me, actually, there was one night we were watching wrestling, I feel, a whole, like, whatever, 2 hours of it on TV, and I spent the whole time racing Whizpig, the first race. I don't know if that is bad or not, but it was very tough for me.
I mean, they cheat. They start the race early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the bosses cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah, Whizpig especially though. But I overcame it, so I don't know. Maybe I don't think I'm very good. So I think that if I can do something, I usually tell people, like, that's a good barometer of difficulty, because I kind of suck at most games. Hyle, anything else you have on the game before we close it up?
Like I said, I could be here until the sun comes up
Sure.
talking about Diddy Kong Racing, and I wouldn't even break a sweat. But No, like, I adore this game. Obviously, it's not a perfect game, and I'm well aware of that, but I really just admire... I've never really experienced a kart racer quite like this. And yes, other kart racers have come along and have kind of either ripped it off or been directly, like, inspired by it and might have done the formula better. But I love Diddy Kong Racing's sense of place. The way it just, like, roots all of its tracks in this kind of tangible, surreal, cartoony island. Like Lee Schuneman, the head of the team for Diddy Kong Racing, was directly inspired by Disney theme parks in like crafting this game's world back when it was like adventure racing and then Pro-Am 64. It was always inspired by a Disney park. So you've got like these very curated sections, but even the lobby and overworld is a very like real exciting place that you just love exploring. And then of course Future Funland is like Epcot, and so just getting to like lose myself in that world, it's something I've never really experienced in a racing game like that. Like you play like a new latter day Mario Kart and you're like, ooh, this track looks lovely, ooh. But like the most you get out of it is, ooh, they reference this track in like the subway station. They've got like this kind of feels like it could be sort of a real place, maybe if you did the homework. But Diddy Kong Racing is all just there in the game, and like even the cast of like nobodies, as most people would view them. I love that about it because it just makes them more, I don't know, special to me, that they're not just these video game all-stars, except for Diddy at the time. Like it's not just, oh, Mario and his wacky friends and his baby self and his gold self and metal self. And it's just, I don't know, it just feels kind of, and this is going to sound really stupid about, again, a game starring woodland critters racing around various environments, but it feels like a real lived-in universe. And yeah, like I just can't speak well enough of this game. I can't do it justice. You just have to play it for yourself. But unless you find an N64 cartridge, there's no legal way to go about that right now.
I know it's frustrating. But, well, yeah, it's I like we said, the sense of place is good, and like the cast, it gives, there's stakes to the game, you know. It's not just Mario Kart where you're off just whatever.
Yeah, why are they racing? Why are they racing Bowser? Bowser is a war criminal. Why is he there? Why did they invite him?
Because because all Mario games are just a stage play, and they're just acting and having fun, and they're relaxing on their time off from work, which is pretending to be fighting, and now they're doing car races and doing tennis. Maybe if you ran a site called Mario Kart Vine, you would know that, but
all I'm saying is Crunch is a spy sent by the Kremlins. There are very, very real consequences.
Mind-blowing.
There are consequences.
We need,
yeah.
yeah. I need a deep dive on this. I'm sure it already exists, but
This isn't just drag racing. This is Diddy Kong Racing for 1 to 4 players. The rough-riding, balloon-grabbing, coin-snatching, boss-beating, rumble-pack, ready racing adventure that's definitely off tracks. Only on Nintendo 64, the fastest, most powerful games console on Earth.
It's a great game. We're going to be talking about it a bunch more. We've got a bunch of guests lined up to come on and talk about various aspects of it, and the more the merrier. So we kind of want to, but we're going to do it differently than when we covered GoldenEye. We did just a million episodes in a row about GoldenEye. We became like GoldenEye 64 for a second.
Yeah.
This year we're probably gonna have like one Diddy Kong episode a month for like half of the year. Yeah. we're gonna get up to a bunch of stuff regarding that game, but our next main game for the N64 library is actually Bomberman 64. So look out for that one. Merritt, I think you said that was a game that you had some history with or something. Do you want to any well wishes for Bomberman 64?
Yeah, it was the first Bomberman game I played, and so when I found out what they actually were about, I was like, "What? I don't want this. I want a weird, awkward 3D adventure, not like a really good multiplayer game."
Yeah, I want one where I like kind of can't see sometimes.
Kind of can't see, kill myself with my bombs a lot of the time. It's kind of Star Wars, but mainly the sequel is Star Wars. I actually just replayed Bomberman Hero, which
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm sure you'll get to at some point.
If we make it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you for coming back on. It was great having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hyle, you as well. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your wide breadth of knowledge about the Kongs, but also your passion about the Kongs.
Like I said, I'm not qualified to really do anything else, so I appreciate any excuse I have to talk about it. I'll take it. So thank you.
Well, great. It's been a great episode, McKenna.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone is having a good New Year. Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy New Year.
And
It's 2025.
It's 2025. Not for us, but I'm imagining.
For, the listeners.
What do you think it'll be like? No. Okay. See everybody later. We'll see you in Bomberman 64.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
And we, of course, want to give a special shout out to our Millennium Star tier patrons. So thank you, Cyberlink420, Darren, Infection Form, Jeremy Aber, Kiefer, Nico Sylvian, Paul, and Underline V. You can find more at patreon.com/flashback64.
See you later, worms.